For hundreds of years, gypsies and travellers have been in conflict with the British authorities. But on a small field in Essex in 2011, an eviction took place and 5 centuries of tension exploded.
Get your hands off me, you're hurting me! She's not a dog! She's a human being!
A simple planning dispute between travellers and local council resulted in scenes never witnessed in Britain before or since.
They destroyed our lives, they shattered us.
It reached the highest levels of government.
Shame on you, David Cameron! Shame on you! Shame on you!
And became a huge international news story.
They will light gas canisters, they will set fire to cars.
There's no doubt there is going to be a battle here.
For those in charge of the eviction, it was a matter of enforcing the law.
Wrong is wrong, and there cannot be one rule for one and another rule for another.
They thought they were above the law on everything.
For those who lived there, it was pure persecution.
It was ethnic cleansing.
The way Hitler rounded up the Jews, that's the way it was.
This documentary will examine the extraordinary events which would question the very laws by which we're governed.
The idea that our planning laws override human rights laws is unbelievable.
Told by those whose lives were consumed by it.
They didn't care about the village, took a different attitude to the English.
In 2 communities at war.
They're setting everything on fire.
They just wanted us out of Basildon, out of Essex.
Scrum, scrum, scrum!
There does seem some shock at just how violent this fight has been.
This is the story of the biggest gypsy eviction in British history.
This is what travellers have to put up with their whole life.
This is the story of Dale Farm.
It was just devastating what they put us through. Fear of God was in our hearts.
Oh, feel the heat, Mimi. Feel the heat.
Oh, Dale Farm was lovely. Dale Farm was like a home. We were out of everyone's way. We had our own little community. And we just loved it. We made it a home. It was our little paradise, really.
Here, come on. Look, put the biscuits in the kitchen.
We were quite happy there. No one bothered us. We never bothered no one. We're all first, second, third cousins. We don't like going among outsiders. We're all one clan.
We put a lot of time and effort into making it our home. And then for this to come on and happen, it just devastated us.
Dale Farm is located near the sleepy village of Crays Hill in Essex, within the jurisdiction of Basildon Council. The land was originally bought in the 1970s by English travellers who legally developed one half of the site. The other half was bought by Irish travellers 20 years later, following a clampdown on illegal gypsy camps.
I think the public are fed up with gypsies moving onto land without permission, staying there until they're turfed off, leaving behind a terrible mess which has to be paid for by the local ratepayers.
The 1994 Criminal Justice Act made it much harder to set up camp around the country. It became increasingly difficult for the travellers to live according to their traditions.
I'm a traveller all my life. I was bred, born and reared a traveller. My mother and father, Lord rest their souls, they were travellers all their life. It's bred in us.
I was born in a wagon, and I was brought up that way. We had to learn to live that life, live in that environment.
Many travellers decided to buy land and put down roots to avoid being constantly moved on.
All we wanted from the community was just to be accepted. And that wasn't a lot to ask. We've never went to nobody in our life for nothing. All we wanted to do was just be accepted.
But there was a problem on Dale Farm. The site the travellers bought was greenbelt, and they did not have permission to develop it.
Johanna, would we put them balloons in the middle?
10 years after purchasing the land, and despite the threat of eviction hanging over them, they're determined to continue their way of life.
It's Mighty Girls Holy Communion, and it's Nora's Girl and Boys Holy Communion.
So how special is this party?
This party is very special because it's going to be the last party we'll ever have in Dale Farm. We'll be on the road, I imagine, after this. Oh, it's lovely, girls. It looks lovely, don't it?
They do with the 2 children, looks lovely.
Beautiful.
This is a real travellers thing, because settled people wouldn't be into all this. But travellers all over from generations is into this.
Normally, children's Holy Communion is between 8 and 9, but because we might be evicted, we'll have to just get it done at the age she is now, because she could be 14 or 15 before she'll make her Holy Communion.
My party looks brilliant.
This is Parkins. Ladies, cheer the glasses, they'll be. Really going over the bed.
Though these parties are seminal events in the traveller calendar, they've been aggravating some of the locals for 10 years.
You see the smoke coming from over here, from our lovely neighbour, Mr. Grigley. He's burning rubbish over there. If he knows there's anything going on here, this is what he does. This is what, you know, tomorrow morning now, this will be on the paper. This little bit of a party, how he had to intolerate the noise, but there'll be nothing about what he's doing over there to us. He's trying now to smoke us out to go to bed. That's a regular thing with him. We were classed as dirty gypsies and dirty people. We weren't brought up dirty people, we were brought up respectable and clean. But to the eyes of the settled community that don't know us, we're just dirty gyppos.
Len Gridley used to live in a quiet country road in a small Essex village, but now he has an illegal travellers' camp at the bottom of his garden. And Mr Gridley doesn't exactly get on with his neighbours.
It's like living in hell, but Beirut, I believe it is quieter than this. You get the constant tooting and the hooters, their bonfires, their noise, their rudeness in the road. They just intimidate the village, and if everyone in the village could sell up and move, I think they would move. The problem started in 2000 when the first 8 Irish gypsy families moved there. They bought 8 plots and it just escalated. From 8 families, it grew to 86 families. Once it got too big, it devalued my parents' property by 300,000. You know, if we wanted to sell it, we couldn't afford to sell it because we wouldn't be able to go and buy another property.
We got pikeys in our backyard. They're thieving from night to morn. If it ain't nailed down, they'll have it away, because that's the way they were born. The planning laws, they are a joke. They don't apply to the pikey bloke. They build what they like, and they always will. The council are scared, and so is old Bill.
It's a disgrace for this government and for this council to let them get away with it.
The only way to get them off is by force, isn't it? That really is the last option.
And that's the only thing they understand is false.
Exactly.
They don't understand anything else.
If it was in France, they'd have the water cannons in there blowing the hell out of them.
Len spearheaded a group of angry locals and took the issue straight to the council.
From day one, the residents approached us as local councillors, along with the members of Parliament. So this is having a real impact on the village. The site was being developed and they wanted the council to do something about it.
The rubbish and everything else you have to put up with coming over, all the bottles, the general junk.
It was Greenbelt, and the main reason for the Greenbelt at Dale Farm was to stop the merging of residential properties, townships into one.
It served a very important purpose, so you can't just start building things without permission.
We must act, in my view, in returning that
back to green belt.
green belt.
Yes.
Although the site was technically greenbelt, it had been previously used as a scrapyard, fueling a belief in the travellers that there were ulterior motives behind the eviction.
Once you're a traveller, you always have discrimination, and you get used to it. You're brought up with it. You get used to it. They just wanted us out of Basildon, out of Essex.
This is Mr. Grizzly's house. If you look through here, you can see it. He does nothing but insult us. Says would chip us the whole lot. I can tell you what he's thinking. He's thinking, please get rid of all the travellers. I guess we're thinking, please get rid of him.
They thought they would get away with it down there and be allowed to stay, but the law is the law. It applies to everyone. Don't matter if you're a traveller, a coloured, religion, whatever you want to call it. There's one law and it applies to everyone.
With the travellers, the residents and the council all refusing to back down, the stage was set for a showdown that was about to become one of the biggest news stories in the world. A short distance from Dale Farm, with a year to go until the main eviction, a smaller traveller site is having its day of reckoning.
Let go! Let go! This is my leg. Like skin, they're dragging a lady about. Get your hands off me, you're hurting me. She's not a dog. She's not a dog, she's a human being. The police are supposed to stop this.
Some Dale Farm travellers are related to the evicted families and see this as a practice run for their larger site. For them, the message is clear.
From day one, the council never wanted us there. Never wanted us there. But we were part of the community in Basildon.
Council is all racist. They turned the whole area against us, just to get us off. They done that to get us off, turned the whole place against us.
We have nothing against them as persons, as people at all. We just feel they're in the wrong place here. This is a residential area.
They should be forcibly moved away to some area where they're not so close to people's windows.
Irish travellers are no strangers to site evictions. The settled community has a long history of trying to force them to live in bricks and mortar.
People just living in houses couldn't live our life, and we couldn't live their life. We have everything in the caravan that they have in the house, but just we have that little bit more freedom.
It's just sheer lunacy to expect that we can have marauding bands of tinkers that can destroy one site and go on another site, and no legislation to stop them.
Travellers have struggled to live their way of life for centuries. King Edward VI passed the first known anti-Gypsy law as far back as the 1500s, stopping them from roaming and trading.
If you catch a wild bird, put him into a cage, he'll die. He's used to freedom. It's the same thing with a traveller. You try and cage them, they'll die or they'll go to jail. It's simple, isn't it?
Nearly 500 years later, in 2001, their descendants started their struggle against the law on Dale Farm. Shortly after legally purchasing the land but developing it without planning permission, the settled community moved against them once again.
The Irish Gypsies bought it, moved in. The road wouldn't cope with it. And they brought all their big caravans in, their lorries, furniture. They didn't care about the village. Took a different attitude to the English. They were trying to take the mickey, and they didn't get away with it.
And I would have much rather the travellers had moved off in 2002, 2003, found somewhere else. We had no choice on the basis of equality and legality, but to support our residents and to ask the travellers to comply with the law.
However, with new Labour in power, the policies set out by Deputy Prime Minister John Prescott had been frustrating local councils. In 2003, he gave the travellers a 2-year window to clear the site, and the news story exploded.
John Prescott says he wants local authorities to provide 300 more legal sites like this one. At the same time, he says they have the power now to tackle illegal sites, but critics say his policies are muddled.
200 families moved onto this greenbelt land nearly 3 years ago and are refusing to move on. The council has tried to force them out by taking them to court, but despite granting authorities more powers, the government has also said they must take into account the Human Rights Act and race relations legislation.
Gypsies and travellers are identified ethnic minorities, so therefore we have to take into account their personal circumstances along with the planning laws that we have to abide by.
But some local residents were unmoved, and while the travellers remained, anger increased.
They make everyone's life a misery wherever they go. They're going around in their traps, driving around all day. Why can't they go to work like everyone else?
I mean, they've got to live somewhere.
Of course. So I want to live somewhere, but don't be on come park on your garden. I want to live, so I like your garden. I left that. What are you going to do about it?
John Prescott's deadline expired in May 2005, and a Crunch Council meeting took place where the future of the travellers would be decided.
The village cannot accept this amount of travellers, and nothing is done. I think you're going to have a massive revolt from the residents of Craze Hill.
Please show. All that's against, please show. Action has been carried.
It seemed the travellers' fate was sealed.
We thought this is a laugh the council is having. They can't do this to us because we're not on green belt land. We're on brown belt because there was a scrap yard before we got there.
I'd had threats from day one from the travellers. I had a guard dog, burglar alarms, panic buttons. That's why I can understand the other residents not speaking out. Why should they do that to us? All we've done is speak out. The law's the law. You've broken the planning law, not us.
A long cycle of enforcement notices and appeals began, raising hopes for the travellers.
But that went on for a number of years. And that's what really gave us more confidence, because we thought it had been going on for so long. But look how long this has taken. They can't put us out. If they could have had us out long before now. It went on for quite a while. A lot of courts, a lot of money, and a lot of sweat and tears went on there.
The stalemate continued for 5 years, until the election of a Conservative-led coalition government.
There's no doubt that we certainly got more support from the Conservative ministers than we had had before, and in fact we'd applied for funds from the previous government and been refused.
In March 2011, Basildon Council met for the final time to decide the fate of Dale Farm. They were debating whether to commit to a price tag of several million for the eviction.
It's crazy to actually go ahead with that. The risks are so tremendous. The eyes of the world are going to be on Basildon, and the administration should be ashamed of themselves.
Why was it right to take the action at Hofields to clear the sites there and yet not at Dale Farm? Wrong is wrong, and there cannot be one rule for one and another rule for another.
Can I see all those in favour? Please show, please. All those against?
The travellers have lost again.
I couldn't understand how they paid so much money to do this to us, because really at the end of the day it's taxpayers' money, isn't it? And they spent all this money to drag us out.
All the council must do now is serve them their 28-day notice.
Let them bring the bailiffs in. We're staying right down to the very last one.
With all legal avenues exhausted, the only way for the travellers to keep Dale Farm is to fight for it.
They think they were just going to back into our trailers and go. Trust me, Basildon will go up and fire before we go.
The biggest gypsy eviction in British history is nearing its endgame. Some of the 400 travellers settled here have decided to sell their chalets for fear of them being destroyed.
Some people, what they're doing is taking their big chalets that the bulldozers is going to come in and break to the very ground while they're selling them. And they're putting a small little trailer instead. Small little trailer, so when the builders come in and if ever they get them out, they have to move alongside the road.
We had no options to go nowhere. We go back on the side of the road where we were told if you go onto a lay-by, you're going to be dragged out. No matter where you go, you're going to be dragged out. So we had no options. Every chalet here with memories. Memories of the babies, when they were born, setting up prams and cots, the girls getting married, children's christenings.
That's breaking my heart. I'm crying for 3 days. I swear to God. Really?
It is, it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, mate, because everyone's going to be separated. It's like the end of the world, Moody. Not the end of the world. That's what it feels like.
Whether you label them anarchists, protesters, activists or whatever, there's little doubt that a steady stream of supporters of the travelling community have been arriving here at the camp for the last week. They've even set up their own Camp Constant, and they're here to bolster the ranks of the travellers for when that eviction day comes. There's no doubt there is going to be a battle here. Nobody is going peacefully.
As the eviction looms, the travellers attract some unexpected support.
Everyone knew that we were fighting for our rights, but we hadn't enough of power to do that. Our voices would never be heard. But these activists came and they got their voices across.
The idea that our planning laws override human rights laws is unbelievable.
It's brilliant there are so many people here, and with this many people we really have an amazing shot at defending the travelling community for once, when it has never happened before.
Help came in all shapes and sizes, including one man who had dedicated his life to fighting for travellers' rights.
What's the mood like today?
Like everybody else, I am very stressed out here, and I'm very worried because people's lives are at stake.
Never before have we seen such great support. There's going to be a resistance. There's going to be a resistance, yeah.
We've been coming here for years, and we've gone on to Dale Farm and we've spoken to the travellers. We turn up now and people we've never seen before are telling us we can't go on and we can't speak to them. Who's in control here, the travellers or the people who've turned up for Camp Constant?
Well, they're quite well integrated and supporting, and I have to be grateful to people of goodwill who are prepared to get between our children and the bulldozers.
We spent about £20,000 on scaffolding. There was 15 miles of barbed wire. It was desperate, but these were desperate times.
2011 had been an unprecedented year for news stories, ranging from the Arab Spring to the London riots, and from the royal wedding to the hunt for Colonel Gaddafi.
Where is he? We're looking for you.
But by September, the focus shifts onto Dale Farm.
They will light gas canisters, they will set fire to cars.
There's a lot of tension, a lot of anticipation, and everyone here wondering now, quite now, this will unfold.
This was the biggest eviction that we'd seen in the UK, I think the biggest in Europe as a whole, and so clearly this was a massively challenging story.
For you, it's important to have a place to be, isn't it, really?
We've not a choice. Where we go, we've no place to go.
This was really now beginning to grow into an international story, and there were cameras from across the globe.
The world's media descended upon Dale Farm. We had Russia Today, Press TV, Al Jazeera, Chinese television. It was really quite extraordinary.
Council say they're determined to go ahead with this site clearance. How long can you hold out?
As long as it takes. As long as it takes. We ain't coming out of in there. They're going to bring my body out in a bag.
What about the kids? Are they frightened?
For God's sake, these children, when they go to bed in the night, they're on their knees praying. That was the biggest travelling eviction there was ever in life's history. You couldn't turn your television on when it was Dale Farm. Every newspaper you buy was Dale Farm. It was the biggest thing I think that ever hit Basildon or England, I think myself.
With hope fading fast for the travellers, they organise a march to bring as much attention as possible to their cause. But for some local residents, the eviction can't come soon enough.
I think they should go. They're just not welcome. Threatening behaviour. They're just horrible in the high street. They just rule the place. They're horrible.
I think they made their own bed to lie in. They knew when they moved there, it was not a proper site. It was an old breaker's yard. It's something that should have never have got to that stage. The council should have stopped it growing from day one.
I live in Ireland. I've got addresses to prove it. It ain't racist, it's fact. It's fact. Keep moving, thank you. Let's do it.
Keep walking, please.
Tell us to go back to Ireland. It's been a racist. We get comments like that every day, we just keep walking. What can you do with people that's prejudiced? Travellers can't do nothing about it because we have no rights. So what he says, if he insults us, we have to just keep walking because we can't do nothing about that.
No, we won't go.
Justice for travellers, justice now! Justice for travellers, justice now!
By law, Basildon Council have had to offer some traveller families an alternative place to live. But the accommodation was universally turned down.
We offered housing to some who qualified. They made it clear that it was against their cultural way of life to live in bricks and mortar.
Our culture is a travelling life and we'd like to be left be a traveller. We're asking for 10 years to move us into a council site, build us a council site. We'd be quite happy with a council site. The only thing he offered us was bricks and mortar. We're not going to move into bricks and mortar, that's not our culture.
I think it was 5 families the council offered the one flat. They just used that flat just to give it to say to people that they offered us alternative accommodation. But in the line of sights or anything like that, no. That was never offered. That was never done.
As the eviction date approaches, the men and women charged with enforcing the law descend on Dale Farm.
I'd worked on hundreds, if not thousands, of travel evictions going back over many, many years. Nothing of the size of Dale Farm. There'd never been anything like it before, and I doubt whether there ever will be again.
With hundreds of travellers and a legion of activists barricaded on site, the council bolsters its force.
There were a huge number of resources dedicated to the site clearance, a huge number of enforcement agents. We occupied a neighbouring field and we had a mini village. It was a massive operation run along military lines.
We don't intend to be evicted from Dale Farm without a big fight. And I'm rather surprised Tony Bull, who's so keen on the green belt, has destroyed little pasture behind you where it's been wrecked by the contractors.
Thank you very much.
It was like this medieval situation of two opposing camps within 20 yards of each other waiting to do battle. We've never seen anything like it.
You should be ashamed of yourself, making children homeless! You should be shot!
Feel a bit upset?
Would you be upset? Well, I've nowhere to put him, I've nowhere to go. I've got no other home, will he that one?
I think there was a real sense in the camp of imminent doom, really, among the travellers, because they could see the amount of resources that the police and the bailiffs had, and they knew ultimately that this wasn't going to be a fair fight, as they would have it.
Look at the state we're in here. Sick old people in here, young children, and we have to live with this, and all them in there thinking they're coming in here doing this. There's a lot of hot blood in here, and believe me, it's going to be cool very quick. The travellers are very determined people. If they have something to fight for, they'll fight for it. This is how we are. We're Irish people, we're strong-minded people, and we believe in fighting for our rights.
The Dale Farm travellers are out of time. In just a few hours, the council's enforcers will be entering the camp.
There's sadness tonight, but there's also a bit of a party atmosphere. After 10 years of living on this 5-acre disputed piece of land, this could be their last night on Dale Farm.
A lot of travellers felt like this really was their last stand, not just the people who were living in Dale Farm, but they were making a last stand for the community as a whole to say, you can't just move us on as they saw it. And they wanted to make that last stand on behalf of the whole of their community.
Runs her down to Nelly's, to the Bell and to the Crown. His engine runs on diesel light, it'll never let him down. He takes it to Basildon Council, oh but only for the crack. Len Grigley at the steering wheel, Tony Ball is on the back.
But despite the pre-battle bonhomie, the travellers are all too aware that just 50 yards away, the council has an army assembled, waiting to storm the site.
My Jesus Christ, it was a war zone with police. I've never seen more police in all my life. We were in a state of shock. It was fear. Fear of God was in our hearts.
It's Judgment Day on Dale Farm.
It's got all the travellers on site. Yeah, we'll just fill a lot of travellers in here. We're all in here. It's very stressful in here. How many? We're going to hang out as long as we can.
After a decade of fighting, Basildon Council has won the legal battle, and the bailiffs are poised to enter the site.
You get that terrible tremor in your chest. Dear God Almighty, am I safe here? Is everything going to be all right? It's there, it's that fear is always in you.
As the resistance intensifies, there is growing concern over the safety of the operation.
We'd already erected that scaffolding and the watchtower above the entrance.
Dale Farm here, but now beneath it they've locked themselves on, essentially creating a human issue.
There was a lot of them there, chaining themselves to barricades, cementing themselves in. They had weapons like timber with nails sticking out of them and spikes. They were just there for a fight against society, you know, the law.
500 police and bailiffs amassed by the council are poised to come onto the site at any time.
I would rather have not been in that position. I would rather Basildon Council was in that position. I'd rather the travellers weren't in that position. We were looking at very serious consequences if things went wrong, and that did weigh heavily on my conscience.
At the barred entrance to the site, this morning's deadline for departure came and went with no movement. The occupants of Dale Farm have drawn their line in the sand. The only question is when the authorities will cross it.
Our operatives, when they begin the site clearance, which will be today, will do everything they can to make sure it's done in a safe and professional manner. But I will be clear that once the operation begins, it will come to an end.
The council has vowed that the eviction will take place today, but nobody knows when. All the travellers can do is await their fate.
All you free-born men of the travelling people, every tinker, rolling stone and gypsy rover, winds of change are blowing, old ways are going, and your travelling days will soon be over.
As the eyes of the world watch,
Yeah, they're out. I can see them.
the order is given for the bailiffs to move in.
I had been required to read out a prepared statement from the council asking them to allow the action to go ahead without resistance.
But one traveller fires a warning shot.
It was quite unpleasant in its own way, and the tea throwing incident was enough to tell us there was not going to be any compliance.
Human rights,
I and the council have some major health and safety concerns. Is there anything I can say or do that will persuade you to remove yourselves in an orderly manner? That is the end of my announcement. Thank you.
Warning issued. The bailiffs retreat to plan the next move.
Now one to the travellers.
Suddenly, at the 11th hour, there's news from the High Court.
Robert just heard it on the TV. Everything is stopped until Friday. Yay! Thank you, everybody.
An injunction has delayed the site clearance for at least 5 days.
They just wanted a pain.
All of a sudden to get this news, it's like a big bubble after bursting open and loads of oxygen blown into us.
The judge is worried the eviction will be too heavy-handed. He's asked the council to return to court to present their case again.
Still might say that they want us out on Friday, but we don't care. We still have that little bit of hope now that we're going to stay here.
Might win it all together.
We might win it all together.
For the council, it was a really difficult situation because sympathy did start to grow for the travellers and they were under a huge amount of media pressure.
I had to go out to the media, which was not pleasant, and say, very sorry, nothing's going to happen, there's an injunction. We've got to get past this injunction before anything else will happen.
I'm absolutely clear that on this issue, on Friday, that the court will find in the council's favour and that the site clearance will be able to continue.
It was hugely frustrating and I'll use the word embarrassing, but it was a bit more than embarrassing. It was humiliating.
With the law behind them, Some travellers who left the site are returning to Dale Farm.
It was a day of celebrations. I was invited across the fence. Do you want to come have a barbecue with us? We're having a drink and everything, we're celebrating. The bailiffs are not coming in. They were like sticking their two fingers up at the bailiffs, you know.
It's not green belt, it's a scrapyard.
The travellers try to laugh about the court battles, but they party by night, knowing they won't always win another day.
The morning after the night before, the residents of Dale Farm awake, and it dawns on them that perhaps the celebrations of yesterday had been a mite premature. The extension was a victory, but they are back in court on Friday.
Well, we won the battle, but we haven't won the war yet.
Basildon Council officials arrive at the Strand convinced the waiting game is over.
Well, I'm hoping that the injunction gets lifted. That's what we need to do so we can proceed with the operation.
This is the council's biggest problem. Keeping the diggers waiting with security to watch them costs thousands each day.
Every day is a bonus.
Every day is a bonus to us.
The deadline is extended, and over the next few weeks, the stalemate continues as the travellers' lawyers ask for 3 judicial reviews.
We'd all go to the courts. We'd go to all of the courts. They knew from day one we were going to fight it right to the very end, because we told them that this was our last stand. There was no place else we had to go.
A delegation in matching outfits left the site, but only to travel to the High Court, where a judge ruled they could stay till at least Monday or maybe Wednesday while he made a decision.
There's no doubt I personally am somewhat disappointed.
Oh God, we used to jump with joy. We could not believe, look at this, we knew it, we knew this is not going to happen. Look, the judges, even after adjourning the court, they're not going to put us out of our homes. And we really and truly believed we were never going to be put out of our places.
It will take as long as it takes, that's up to professionals and the judiciary to a certain extent, but it will take as long as it will take. Thank you very much. Okay.
Hello, guys.
We never slept last night. The girls never slept with the children, and we don't know what to expect today, to be honest.
After nearly a month of appeals and injunctions, the High Court reaches its final decision.
I do take quite satisfaction on behalf of local people and people across the country who've supported us, that in all matters the council has been found to have acted lawfully. We believed all along that we were doing so, and as you can imagine, I welcome the decision of the court confirming this.
Legally for the travellers, there is nowhere left to go.
It was bad, it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. We didn't know whether we were coming or going.
They thought they were above the law on everything. It was sent a message to the rest of the Irish communities across the country, travellers, that they were not going to be allowed to do this ever again.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
Every last glimmer of hope for the travellers is gone. Without the law behind them, a turf war is on the cards.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women.
Time has run out for the residents of Dale Farm. But this is to be an eviction like no other. Overnight it was decided that sending the bailiffs in first would be too dangerous. It would be a job for a small army of highly trained and battle-hardened riot police.
When I arrived at 4 o'clock was when I was then informed that the police had taken the lead. That was not what I thought was going to happen the day before. I remember 100 policemen lined up in riot gear, and I thought, what is going to happen and what have we done?
As dawn breaks, the order is given to storm the site.
We
broadcasting from the barricades when all of a sudden we heard this huge commotion at the back of Dale Farm. We ran across the site to the back wall. I just remember really distinctively seeing the flash of a taser gun, and just all hell broke loose at that point.
I got up and I opened the door and I looked out and I couldn't believe it. It was the scariest thing we've ever seen in our life. The entire lane was black. There were police, dressed all in black, helmets, glasses. Couldn't see faces, couldn't see hands.
Council and the bailiffs, they stood back and the police just took over. We were outnumbered 10 to 1. And there was a lot of us there, but there was an awful lot of police there.
It was the riot police, not the bailiffs, who came to call just after dawn. They were met by a handful of protesters and a barrage of missiles.
The travellers were clearly terrified and distressed. It really was just a scene of absolute chaos.
This woman was willing to face police tasers. She was trying to protect her family.
Oh, Jesus, my children are dying.
Where are you hurt?
My back. My back.
Who was it that hit you?
I don't know.
A few minutes later, she was taken away to hospital.
The police break through the line of protesters and reach the travellers' homes.
I'm an advocate of non-violence, but there's a tremendous provocation when people come right up to your door. They're going to break your door down, they're going to smash down, the children are screaming. You're going to lose it. You're going to lose it.
This is private property.
You want to be there to hear the way the kids was crying. And they're screaming. You know, it was like a war. If they had gas bombs, they would have used them. It was a war zone.
They come in! We only want to go beyond the barricade by 10 metres.
I think the difficulty for the police was that when they were coming over the back of those barricades, they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. The protesters, many of them had been in situations like this before, and rocks were hurled. And so they went in hard, but we have to remember what they were up against.
With the violence escalating, Tony Ball is called on to defend the council and the police's tactics.
Certainly I was sad to see riot police on the streets of Basildon, something which I hope never to see again. But I'm clear that it's the right thing to do, to apply the law equally and fairly to everybody.
The use of the taser was certainly a shock, but it was in response to being threatened by somebody who had a big plank of wood with a nail on the end of it. So it seemed a proportionate response to me.
I think if the bailiffs had gone in first, they would have got hurt, and seriously, if not people killed. For someone to make the decision sending in the police first, they were right.
Get it all on camera! Get it on film!
I admire them for that day. You know, I wouldn't have liked to have been in their position.
The police are gaining ground and will soon be able to let the bailiffs on site. So the protesters raise the stakes.
This is gonna blow any minute at all, and we're gonna be blew to smithereens.
The largest gypsy eviction in British history is raging. What was home to a few dozen traveller families up until this morning is now nothing short of a battleground.
No, really, it really is frightening. It's proper frightening. Look, they're setting everything on fire. Oh, it's pretty frightening though.
Due to the violent resistance of some activists, the riot police have spearheaded the operation.
They said they were going to have a peaceful eviction, but there's nothing peaceful about them. They've really, really been violent. And it's not the bailiffs, it's the police. There's no bailiffs even in the site yet. It's just all police. I mean, they've taser guns, they've batons, they've everything. Meg, show me her face. Look at her face.
They came out to just start shoving us all out of the way, so I fell and hit my face off the wall. They were rough. Gas bottle.
Some activists appear intent on destruction, despite the fears of the travellers.
For the activists, really, this was a political situation. It was a chance to challenge the state, to fight back. A lot of them were anarchists. But for the travellers, this was a highly personal issue. This was their home that they were trying to protect. So while the activists got stuck in,
Scrum, scrum, scrum!
a lot of the travellers, I think, were quite upset by the violence that they saw.
You have your place in history as evil, soulless cunts. That's how you'll always be remembered, unless you throw down your shield and fuck off. You will be, in history, forever known as a fascist.
I certainly don't think the activists helped the Travellers' case, particularly with the wider public. Certainly they proved to be an encumbrance to what the police and bailiffs had to do, and that's why the police had to move in first.
Protesters were ready and waiting for this. They knew what they were getting themselves into. But for the travellers on the other side of the police lines, it does seem some shock at just how violent this fight has been.
Government, capitalism, all is rubbish. There is not democracy.
The police have commandeered the main gate, allowing the bailiffs to move onto the site.
It stood for weeks as a symbol of resistance to the eviction at Dale Farm. Today, in just a few seconds, the scaffolding tower that's blocked the entrance to the illegal site was down. As the last of the locked-on campaigners were cut free from the fences they chained themselves to, the question arose, where would the travellers go now?
You're sitting there looking at your home. It's like your life's earnings there, gone in front of you within seconds.
What are you going to do now, maybe? Take the stuff out, air it, put it in the car. Honest to God, my heart is doing 100 miles an hour. You know what they done to me?
This is not on. This is what travellers have to put up with their whole life.
Where are we going to go, Jenny? Please tell me where we're going to go to school.
It was getting stabbed in the heart, wasn't it? You're there and you can't cry because you're that filled up with anger and disgust. You're there and I don't know. Words can't put it into the state of mind that we were in. It was just heart-rending. It was heartbreaking.
The morning after the site clearance and the eviction is all but over. The bulldozers start to demolish and clear what is for some the only home they've ever known.
I'm shocked that they're doing this. It's not really good. Dim police, they may go away because they're evil.
Are you scared?
Yeah.
After some fierce resistance, the protesters defending the site finally concede that the battle for Dale Farm is lost.
We did invite you, you're a long time with us, and we're so grateful and thankful to you. Now we'll make a stand together when everybody's there, and we'll leave peacefully, activists and travellers together. We'll show them that we are proud people.
Some activists have been there for months.
I feel sad, Daddy, because all these are our friends.
So the travellers decide to walk them out in a final act of solidarity.
We were fighting a losing battle. And these young activists, if one of them ever got hurted, it would be our fault. So all the activists stood in the middle and we marched them all the way down, give them a chance to get away.
We poured our hearts out to them and told them how thankful we were and how sorry we were for the hurt that we were after getting done to them.
Many of them were really quite emotional about it. This had been a long fight for them. I think they did feel the battle, in a very small way, had been won because they'd made their point in the media. Those pictures had been streamed around the world, and they'd said, as a traveller community, we will put up a fight and we will make our point that we need somewhere to live.
For the council, the march was testament that the struggle was finally over.
I felt very relieved. I felt a little bit emotional actually, because I still had great compassion for, and this may sound like empty words, but I did have sympathy for travellers. Wickford has a long history of living side by side with gypsy and travellers. So on an individual basis, some of the women who I got to know, I did feel sorry and some compassion for.
For Dale Farm's most forthright critic, however, it's not an outright victory.
We'll wait till they're all gone. Celebrate when the last one goes out.
The eviction is finally finished. But the story of Dale Farm is far from over, and nobody could have predicted what happened next.
One year on, it is hard to believe anyone ever fought over this land. Cleared to create Greenbelt, Dale Farm looks more grey and brown.
They were going to turn it back into Greenbelt. How would it grow to turn it into Greenbelt? Because from the scrapyard storage that was there, the scrapyard rubbish that was there, there's no grass ever going to grow there.
Len Gridley says the council's given him pollution and a case for compensation.
I'm not going to wait 2.5 years, 3 years, 5 years for this council. I've been waiting 17 years. So if it means this year I've got to take legal action, I will have to.
The reason the council left the land so churned up like this was to stop the travellers bringing their caravans back onto the site. That means some have moved away to Cambridge, some to Leighton Buzzard, and some just a few yards down the road, right outside the entrance to Dale Farm.
We weren't going anywhere because we'd nowhere to go. They're no further on. Oak Lane is still Oak Lane, travellers are still on Oak Lane. What's the difference? They didn't gain anything by their lovely big eviction.
You've got some travellers still living illegally yards from the site, the Environment Agency investigating potentially dangerous levels of pollution, and villagers saying they might sue you if there is pollution there. What benefit has actually come from all this?
There's no doubt there are still some challenges to deal with, which we will. But, of course, the issue is applying the planning law fairly across the whole borough. How could the council turn down any application while, if you like, turning a blind eye to Dale Farm?
It is a point clearly made, and a year on, there is no longer anything here worth fighting for. Paul Brand, London Tonight, at Dale Farm.
Millions were spent fighting over that piece of scrap land, and for the council clearly it was a point of principle that the law should never be broken no matter who you are. But really this was an old scrapyard, and from the traveller's point of view, if they can't live there, then where are they going to be welcome?
There's no doubt that I would have wished that by now come to some kind of community purpose, whether it be for wildlife or nature or whatever. But the council has not secured the land in its ownership as yet, and so therefore has not been able to do so.
It's our land, we paid for it. And I'm living in the front half now. They spent all that money to get about 30 families down the front. When I'm driving up along the road, looks up and say, I used to live up there, you know what I mean? It used to be a lovely place up there. Look at it now. It's like a bomb site, like somebody dropped a bomb in the middle of it. And they just left it.
The world has moved on in the 10 years since the eviction, with the far right on the rise across the globe.
We should not be opening our doors to Romanian criminal gangs.
We are in enemy territory.
Strong borders, no drugs, no gangs, and we want no caravans, thank you.
And discrimination towards gypsies has intensified.
It happened this morning, you come police, children say, go, 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 nothing respect, nothing.
For some of those that lived on Dale Farm, the eviction was simply a symbol of something far more sinister.
It was ethnic cleansing, but the whole world could see that. They destroyed our lives, they shattered us. They took what we worked very hard for and destroyed it.
The way Hitler rounded up the Jews, all the little children with their mother, that's the way it was. And they had no shame in them, they had no morals whatsoever. The police or the council had no morals whatsoever.
That hurts more than anything, ethnic cleansing, racism, that was never the issue. It was the upholding of planning law. That's what it was at the beginning and that's what it was at the end. I actually agree that anybody should be able to live their life as they wish. But it's got to be under the law and within the law.
I'm not sure I'd go as far as to say this was proven ethnic cleansing, but what I would say, I think, is that there was less of a sympathy, less of an empathy with this particular group of people than I think there would have been with any other group in our society if they'd been moved on, perhaps demolishing a block of flats, for example. I think there would have been far more sympathy in the press. I think politicians would have found it far more difficult to move on any other group in society.
I just can't believe that this is happening in Britain. We see what happened in Nazi Germany, and it seems to me this is like the first bit of the train ride that leads to Auschwitz. It started somewhere. It started little and got big. And if you can pick on a group of people because of who they are, then where does it end?
The Dale Farm story continues to this day.
We've had a property company, developers, come and look at the site. They want to build 500 houses on here. The Gypsies want to sell it. If they all sell to the property company and have an agreement, There'd be no more travellers in Crays Hill as such. And they built 500 houses here.
Do you think that's a good thing for the area?
What would you rather look at, a rubbish tip or a housing estate? I think most people would say a housing estate.
If I can get some money out of it, it would be nice to buy another place for myself and my children, besides leaving it to the council. And there's no way in the world would I leave my place to the council. They'll have to bury me above in it.
There has been a big transformer station built on Oak Lane, which means that, to my belief, the council is giving a wink and a nod to the establishment of a big housing estate right on Dale Farm.
I'm not on Basildon Council anymore, but I'd be against residential development, so not just because of my history with Dale Farm. The principle of Dale Farm being greenbelt is to stop urban sprawl. There are very sound planning reasons why it should not be developed for residential use.
Now they're trying to sell the place off to the land developers. They want to come in and dig up the place and build houses on it. How can you build houses on greenbelt land? Wouldn't be fair, would it? Picking up the lovely green scenery and building a house there.